All right, welcome everybody. First up on the agenda is from Kernal about bucket notification and multi-site support.
Hey, hi everyone. So I put in a PR there, and you all had a suggestion or a comment on that PR. So a few weeks back, when we decided that we wanted to revamp the notifications, the idea was we were going to plan using the new way of storing the topics. Earlier, the topics were all stored in a single Rados object, and going forward, we now store each topic into a single Rados object, and the notifications to earlier were stored as objects, and now they are stored as bucket attributes. So this change was proposed to be as a notification V2 change. So as a part of implementation, what I did is I implemented this after consulting with Casey as a multi-site feature. So it's not a regular RGW flag, which we usually define inside rgw.yaml.in. So I kind of clubbed it, kind of two things into one by having this as a multi-site feature flag. If this flag is on, then you'll use the new version of notification, and also it'll support replication into multi-site config. You all had a confusion saying that probably this is for the single site. This creates a little more confusion because it's kind of it kind of mentions that it is more towards multi-site feature and not kind of version V2. And I was of opinion we could use that same feature flag and try to combine the two functionalities into one. So you want to talk a little more? What about more of your confusion here?
Yeah. So I'm perfectly fine with using the same flag for both things, but to me, it's a change of the data model first, and the code should reflect that. I mean, I have nothing against the implementation. What I just want to see is first step is changing the data model, not thinking at all about multi-site, because my fear is that we would leak dependencies because we do those things together between multi-site and the change of model. Now, if the only leak between the two things is the name and the location of this flag, then I'm good. This is fine. Just rename that to V2 instead of notification syncing, and then I'm good. I have no concerns about that. And if this needs to be like a per site flag and not a global one, because when we do upgrades, sometimes we never going to upgrade some sites and we are going to upgrade other sites, I'm good. I have no objections to that. But I do want to see a clean code that has nothing to do, maybe except this flag, that has nothing to do with multi-site syncing, that implements the new model.
I mean, what in the PR, the thing that this PR does is that it implements the metadata handler abstraction,
which is exactly which is exactly what I don't want to see in the code that changed the data model for notifications.
Just to clarify too, don't you have a PR that makes it go away?
Yeah, I did link that in the PR, and I think we have a plan for handling the two.
Okay.
It doesn't do away with the metadata handler abstraction itself, just kind of some additional layering for backend stuff.
Okay, that's nice.
So
what I'm saying, it's a big change in the data model. It's a big change to how notification work. I want to see that just working. I want to test that. I want to verify it is working. It's a great change. I'm in favor of this change. And the problem is not with the flag. The problem is that I want to see implementation that has nothing to do with sync. Like, I want to see the new data model, even if we don't implement the syncing, right? It's a great change regardless of anything.
So I mean, my thought there, or I mean, right, I linked the PR that I've worked on recently, so I've been thinking about the metadata model And I just think that that brings in some requirements that we want to make sure are part of the data model that we end up with. So I do think it's useful to see exactly how that looks. And
What kind of requirement? But this is exactly the leaking of dependencies that I don't want to see there. Like what kind of requirements?
I mean that you can index a specific topic by a metadata key, that you can read an entire metadata object and format it as JSON and vice versa to store it back. Those are requirements from metadata sync. And then separately, every time that you write to the metadata, you have to add a entry to the MD log so that the result gets sunk.
But okay, but
That's pretty much all handled by this PR already.
Oh, okay. So my question, can we separate things that are dependencies with things that are just requirements? So JSON encoding, sure. You have a struct, you want to support JSON encoding, you want to support XML encoding, whatever you want to do there, this is fine. But if you need to inherit from something and implement some virtual interfaces and all that stuff, then I want that to be done separately. It's going to take a while. It's going to be a big change, the change in the data model. I don't want to introduce more complexity into this change. It's a big change by itself.
Yeah.
I want to do the migration properly on this change. I want that to just work first.
I do understand that. And right, I think the main part that makes that hard is just the way that the metadata backend thing kind of forces this PR to do. You can't just use normal Rados reads and writes. It has to do all the reads and writes through the metadata backend. So if we wanted to split this out, you would have to re-implement the metadata reads and writes as raw Rados. And I feel like that's going in the wrong direction.
And that's what I was saying. It'll be a dual work so that you'll have this PR and then the next PR will again unwind whatever changes we do. Like we first go and do a raw write and then now change that and now do the write via metadata handler, backend handler, right? To add on, I had another point as well. So today the buckets and the users also go via the same route. You don't write raw object, you actually go via the metadata backend handler, even if it's a single site. So this is using that same model even for topics, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to move away from that stuff in the PRA linked kind of.
Yep. Right.
It creates separate like Rados specific interfaces to read and write the metadata, and kind of implements both the cell interfaces and the metadata interfaces via those Rados specific functions.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like that layout better, but currently I think it's fine for the PR to use metadata backends the way that it is. And sorry, Yuval, I know that it's messy,
Okay,
but I do think that's the right way to approach this.
Yeah, like okay, I don't want to kind of ask the team to implement the same thing twice. That doesn't make sense. I thought that you can implement part of the thing, but you're saying this is not possible.
Well, you could change the sequencing, it sounds like, of the metadata backend change, maybe. But maybe that would be a pain in the butt since it's already done.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more important to make progress on this notification sync stuff than it is to clean up backends. But
I think that's the only way to do it only once. Also, it's because it's done.
Yeah. So, I mean, the stuff in this PR, Yuval, I don't think that really makes it that much more difficult to work with in a single site test scenario. So I do think that we can mostly ignore it when working through the migration paths.
So the zone config change are not more difficult than just a global parameter config parameters change. They don't require a restart or something.
But remember, you all, I said in the comment as well, the reason we went with the zone thing is because if you have multiple zones, and as you said, if the other zones don't upgrade, we don't want the V2 to take into place because that will not then replicate. You still want to use their old model until all the zones are synced together. I mean, upgraded. I mean,
so hold on. So what we said, or the code is structured in a way that we support both models at the same time, right? So then, or that we support the old model and the new code.
correct.
So if this is just kind of a, you're going to upgrade zones one by one or something, then we're still good because you can say, I'm going to switch on the flag when everything is upgraded. If you envision a case where some zones are never going to be upgraded, or going to be upgraded a year after some other zone, so because I mean the code should be written in a way that during the upgrade it also works. So during the upgrade you're going to have a couple of RGWs in the same zone, and some of them going to have the new one, and some of them going to have the old one. So the code has to work in this case as well, right? This is the main scenario. Now, if there is a requirement saying that you can have a case where you're going to upgrade one zone, and the second zone you're going to upgrade that 6 months from now, and during those 6 months you do want, like, zone A and zone B that will both upgrade, you want them to sync, and zone C you don't want it to sync because that's going to be upgraded much later. Then in this case it doesn't make sense to make that per zone. But if it's just a matter of what's going to be in the process of upgrade, then we should handle that, and the regardless, right?
So coming to your scenario, what do you anticipate then? What should that zone C? Suppose A and B upgrade, if zone C don't upgrade, and then zone A and B are using the new version, they both are in sync with number of topics and bucket notification. What should zone C do when it upgrades? You will still run the migration step again there. And then what about the topics that are now there inside A and B? You will do, what would you do in that case? I mean, is this a realistic scenario? I'm just thinking about it.
No, so I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting this is a realistic scenario, but I'm saying this is the only scenario in which I see that the flag is not a global flag. Because if this is just a matter like you have, I don't know, 30 RGWs, 10 in each zone, and you're just going to upgrade them slowly across all zones, then you don't need a flag per zone because you're going to switch the flag on only after all 30 were upgraded.
Right. I thought we were in agreement that we wanted a global flag and not per zone ones.
Yeah, so I'm saying the only scenario in which I think that a per zone makes sense is that if you have a couple of zones that you want to upgrade and a couple of zones that you don't want to upgrade, but there'll be issues because there'll be no syncing between the upgraded ones and the non-upgraded ones, and I'm not sure this is even a valid scenario. So if this is not a valid scenario and we agree on that, then the flag could be global. It doesn't have to be a per zone flag.
It is kind of global, right? Casey, aren't the zone group feature flags kind of global, like for that entire zone group?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't want to support a scenario where you upgrade some zones but leave another zone behind broken.
Mhm.
So I do think all zones need to upgrade and support that before you turn it on globally.
Okay, so maybe this could be just a global flag. What does it need to be?
It is a global flag. The zone group features is a global. So even if I update that zone group zone modifier, that feature is not enabled until the zone group is committed. So, and zone group commit will only happen if that flag is enabled on all these zones. That's how the zone group feature flags work.
So how is that different than just a regular RGW global flag?
RGW, yeah, go ahead. RGW global flag would be for that particular gateways. It won't be shared across all the gateways. So you could turn on for that gateway instance, but it could be off for the other instance.
Oh, okay. And you want that to be for everybody?
Right. That's what I meant by global.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's important that everybody agrees on the value and that nobody changes until everybody's ready.
Oh, right. Because you cannot change like a local conf file or something.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
That's the reason it is a zone group feature flag. Yep.
Okay.
And Yuval, I do get your confusion about multi-site versus not multi-site there, but even single site deployments have a zone and zone group, and so can set and check these flags. Currently, they're all documented under the multi-site section, so I think it would be less confusing if we move that. But it was added for the reshard stuff in multi-site, so that's where it ended up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I would suggest renaming this because I think that syncing is an automatic outcome of using the new format and not vice versa.
Yeah, I like notification v2 or topic v2.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like notification v2 as well. I could change that. I put in bucket application as the name of the flag. I could change it to notification v2. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Yeah. Well, I guess there aren't any options. I mean, if you don't want to do a rewrite, if it's just not, I thought this is just splitting the code to two, but if this is not possible, then
yeah.
Okay. I mean, Casey, did you say that there are you're thinking of changing that, or is this not something on the table?
Sorry, changing what exactly?
Changing
the backend, yeah.
The way that the dependency work. So can we make the dependency more loose in the code, in the sense that I can write whatever I want and then add the metadata sync as an additional action on top of the code that I already written? What I'm saying, if I need to first inherit from some virtual interface and implement stuff, then this is a strong dependency. But if I use some other mechanism to do that, then I can create a much weaker dependency that I can do after I write the initial code.
Right. Well, right. I kind of described the approach that I took for other metadata handlers, and so if I do end up rebasing that PR after these changes, then I would take an approach like that. But I mean, this PR, I guess it depends on where you need that abstraction, because this PR essentially hides that behind a SAL interface anyway. So if you're outside of Zipper, then you should just be calling into the SAL driver interfaces, and it shouldn't matter whether those use metadata backends or not.
Okay, you're saying this is right. This is in the but even inside the Redis implementation, again, even inside the Redis implementation, I want to be able to implement a feature that stores information, and then have a next step saying, "Oh, I also need to sync this information as part of metadata sync." Okay, I can do that. This is Redis specific. I understand that, but it's not about cell or Redis. It's about the order in which I implement something.
So I mean, you could break up what's in Kernel's PR, like for example, the Rados store read topic function is calling into the metadata backend to read stuff. If you want something else in the Rados backend to be able to call that, then you could separate it out into a separate function that both can call. What exactly is it that you need to do on top of this in the Rados backend?
No, what I mean is that if I'm writing that regardless of metadata sync, then I'm writing to an object, or in the case of notification Well, I guess identification is going to automatically happen, right? Because those are bucket attributes, right? The question is only with the topics, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So my question is, like, if I want to implement that first, then I just write the topic object, right? And that's it. And
Sorry, what do you need to implement that isn't already in this PR?
oh no, nothing. Just the like writing the system object that is holding the topic. I mean, there's nothing special there if I'm not doing the metadata sync, right?
Right, but that's currently abstracted behind a bunch of layers in the metadata backend.
Yes, and this is what. So when I currently read the code, what I see is that I'm using some metadata stuff for syncing, and like, no, I want to write the topic into a system object.
That's exactly what the metadata backend's put function does.
I understand it does that, but the author doesn't write it like this, right? He writes it the other way around. Anyway, I understand this is the interface. Like I don't think there's any kind of useful outcome from the discussion. But if I want to write a topic in an object, I want the code to say I write the topic in the object. I don't want the code to say I need metadata sync.
The reason we are going via metadata because it also goes and then writes to the MD log, right?
I understand it does the
Yeah.
work. I understand it does the work. But I mean, as somebody that reads the code and try to understand what it does.
Well, this is a curse of maybe abstraction that we have been carrying for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and that's why I did all the work to refactor and get rid of all that layering. It's just, what's the best way to make progress from where we are?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think currently all the system object stuff that you're referring to is hid behind RGWSI bucket SOBJ. I think that's the place.
Yeah, except in this case, it's for the notification topic metadata objects. So Yuval, I mean, I would just say that there's kind of a distinction between stuff for metadata sync and the abstraction for representing metadata objects in Rados. This is all metadata, whether it's buckets or topics, but metadata sync has some extra requirements about how they're represented and to make sure that changes are logged in the MD log. So it's the metadata backends add some of that stuff, but I would still think of it conceptually as writing a system object.
Okay.
That's just to say that it's not quite as bad as you think.
No, I'm not suggesting there's any like, again, my comment on this and my comment on Kunal's PR is not that with something that the code does or doesn't do. It's the organization of the code that make it more complex to understand what it does.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of imposed by the fact that we have all that metadata backend stuff, and this was kind of the only way to do it.
Okay.
So, I mean, the part that I'm really interested to see is how we handle the migration paths, like what abstractions we have to make sure that we're reading from the right versions and writing to the right versions. And I think the SAL interface essentially supports both versions with the topics versus topic interfaces. So it seems like all of the migration stuff will live on top of that outside of SAL. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the initial thinking was that, well, I don't remember. Again, we kind of put down lots of ideas there, but the initial migration would be just going to be an action taken by like an admin action that goes through all the topics and move them over. When it comes to notification, I think this is more complex. The way that this is going to be implemented, because it's the per bucket. So, but I mean, we have like a document saying, kind of trying to list all the issues and give them some ideas. So I don't remember exactly what we wrote there, but we can revisit that once we start to work on the migration.
Okay.
So then I just have to change the name of the feature flag. That's it. That's what we do now. And yeah, and
I mean, there were a couple of other more specific comments in the PR, but nothing too big.
So, right, should we try and test and merge essentially what's here before we start working through the migration and like fallback paths for upgrades? Or does that all need to happen together?
It doesn't need to happen together, because
Yeah.
we're just merging the PR to main, right? So, and main doesn't have any requirements for migration.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that before we cut the next release, for sure.
Okay.
It's a requirement, right? We cannot deliver this without migration to the S release, but we can merge that. I mean, nothing breaks if we merge that.
Agreed. And I would like to see an early merge so that I can get started on the rebase of the other PR. Hopefully I can kind of clean up some stuff there in parallel.
Okay. Yeah, I looked at the PR like more closely if I had like more small and specific comments, like on there was one comment on the downcasting and one about the tenants, but I don't think there's anything too big there.
Yeah, I was just holding on. I've done those changes, removed the downcasting, and then adding tenant as well to the OID. Yep, I should just push those changes, and then yeah, give you a heads up. Should be done
Okay.
today. Yep.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And just Casey, do you want to move the forward request changes along with this, or you want to? If you, I see you already have the PR, whatever you suggest.
Yeah, I would keep it in there for now and just kind of let the two PRs race, and we'll rebase the notification PR if the other one merges first.
Cool. Sure.
All right, let's make sure we have time for other discussions. We can follow up on this PR for the rest. Next on the agenda is from Jane to discuss lifecycle expiration and delete markers. Would you care to summarize where we are with that?
Yeah, sure. This is the issue of LC expiration action on the current object version in a version bucket and in multi-site settings. Because in multi-site settings, the LC process is done independently along different zones. And if, for example, if the LC expiration action applied on the current version in the master in the source zone, and then replication happens before the LC process happens on all this, like on the secondary zone, then everything is fine. But if this replication of the delete marker, happens after LC process happens in like other zones, there's gonna be problem because all zones the delete marker will have like after LC process will have like different version IDs, and the replication if one application tries to sync up this delete marker, and if on the remote zone, if there's already a delete marker with different IDs, it will thinks this object is already gone and it will fail out. So it eventually can create an inconsistency situation. Like on different zones, we all have delete marker with different version IDs. It's gonna cause some issues.
Makes sense. And Matt in chat pointed out that it doesn't sound specific to lifecycle. Essentially, it's just both zones racing to create a delete marker. So I agree that it's just a problem in general that we identified through lifecycle.
But it is also probably, I mean, am I correct or not correct? Is it also a problem exposed by not replicating all the same actions? The actions we stopped replicating.
So I think currently so when you try to delete the delete marker on either zone, they both create their own version of delete markers. And now we would have expected the sync to actually replicate its delete marker version, but we don't allow it due to, I think there was a PR that was introduced a while ago. Let me just link it here.
Right. So before we actually got a duplicate delete marker, I think that's what Casey was applying, or maybe you were. I mean, someone was applying with this morning in our engineering meeting.
Yeah.
So that was a bug, but it didn't have the effect that we now see.
Sorry, which is the other bug? I didn't follow.
Well, if there were duplicate delete markers, what effect would that? Does that have no effect? I guess you never noticed it, so I guess it doesn't, but it's confusing. So it's confusing me in the moment.
Yeah, so I revisited Jane's description of this in the lifecycle PR, and it sounds like it didn't result in 2 different delete markers ending up in one zone. It was just that when you try to replicate the creation of a delete marker and you already have one, then the sync wouldn't happen. And so that could still end up with inconsistent version IDs.
They do end up, and they always did end up with inconsistent version IDs.
That's right.
What does that mean? So is it always the case? Is it the case then that it always, and it wasn't always the case, that if you then deleted that delete marker, that on one zone it couldn't be normalized to the other zone? This has always just been there.
That's what I would guess would happen, since deletes of a version ID include the version ID that was removed. And so I don't think that would sync correctly.
It appears to follow. Okay.
Yes, I've tested that. If you delete marker on one zone, the other zone, like the replication won't take care of the other side, so it will remain there.
I believe you completely. I'm just surprised this bug could survive so long. If we didn't recently introduce it, but that's just what it is.
So what's the right place to address this, I guess, is the question. To me, it seems like when sync wants to create or wants to replicate a delete marker, and we see that we already have a delete marker, I think we should try to resolve the conflict at that point and make sure that we always choose, I guess, the version with the higher timestamp. But it sounds like we would have to rework deletes so that they had this special behavior for multi-site.
Yeah, I think currently the second delete marker is failing with end in the bucket link OLH if we already have an existing delete marker. And that's why it's failing to sync.
Okay. So if it's link OLH, it's happening in CLS RGW, and I guess we would just need to make sure that we send enough information in so that it can make the right decision.
So are you suggesting that we want to make this change only for multi-site to allow more than one delete markers?
I don't think we want to allow more than one delete marker, but we would want to allow a newer delete marker version to overwrite an existing one. And maybe CLS RGW isn't the only way to. Actually, I think it could work as long as CLS RGW updates the index correctly. Then the OLH head object should be able to replay the same log and get the same result. So essentially, link OLH in the bucket index would have to have the timestamps so that it could do the comparison and choose one.
Okay, so I'm just pasting some code link here. Even if we do that, is it going to conflict with this code block here? Because if the OLH indicates that it already refers to a delete marker, then we don't take a new delete marker.
Yeah, it looks like that's where we would have to add some extra logic to potentially overwrite what's already there.
Right, okay.
As long as we have some way to know what the existing version ID of the delete marker is, we could look it up and hopefully have a timestamp to compare against.
Yeah, that should be possible.
Could you, that link is great. Could you copy it into the tracker issue so that we have it for reference?
Yeah,
It's there already.
It's already linked. It's also linked in the
Perfect.
in the GitHub PR.
So there's already a PR to fix this, and is it fixing it the same way that you're describing, Casey?
No, the PR like Silva is talking about. I think it's LCPR. It's not.
Oh,
not
the older one. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the LCPR.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm backing away now.
Yeah, it's just showing where the cause is. We don't have a fix.
Okay, so are we agreed on a strategy to try here?
Yeah, I think that works. Can
Any
put
other
that in the
questions,
tracker.
Jane?
Put some notes in the tracker, Jane.
Yeah. So nobody else is working on this, right? So if not, I will just work on this.
Yeah, I think what Kalpesh is working on is a little different. So yes, nobody's working on this as of now.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, great. Let's move on. Let's see. Next is an FYI about multi-site tests failing. Was this you, Shilpa?
Yes, that's right. So multi-site tests, this is the same crash that we saw last week. And also the crash happens later on, but then we failed to write to error repo. And that happens after some changes were made in the PR that I linked, where the RGW SI Rados handle that is used to create the Librados IO context earlier to open the RGW pool to get the error repo ID, but now we call the RGW Rados ref directly. So I think it's something that we're missing. I'm not sure what exactly, but I'm still looking into it. So just wanted to let you know that we're still behind on getting the multi-site tests running well because of this issue. So we still have to fix this, and then later on, I think we'll have to work on the other failures.
Okay. I mean, we could consider reverting the PR until we figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. But I was just thinking, is it something simple that I'm missing? Maybe you and Adam or anyone else, if you have some time, could take a look, and I could fix that quickly. But if it's not something that's obvious, then I'm okay to revert. For just 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's spend a couple of days putting our heads together on it first.
Okay.
E.NOT.con is an interesting error. I would guess that maybe we're shutting down the Rados client, and that's racing with sync somehow. But I didn't see anything about initialization or shutdown order in that PR.
Yeah.
Can you tell from logs if it's racing with shutdown somehow?
So I don't see any race and shutdown here because the shutdown really happens sometime like really late. So the very first problem is that we cannot open the context, IO context for the error repo OID. And then after that, you have a series of failures that leads up to the crash. So basically, a series of E.NOT cons. So that comes from the boost as 0, right? Yeah, the transport endpoint not connected. Or is it something that's Librado specific?
Yeah, I assumed it was Librado since it was coming from IO context create.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that means it has nothing to do with the AIO completion call that we make later on. So, okay, so we can leave that out of the picture. So it's just the opening the pool. Yeah, okay, let me know when you're able to take a look, and then we can discuss on Slack.
Yeah, is it easy to reproduce locally just with test
Yes.
multi?
Yes,
Okay.
you could just create, you could just by default create objects and dump them into a repo, and you would see it crashing.
Okay, yeah, I'm building a branch. I'll play with it and follow up on Slack.
Yeah, okay. You just need a couple of objects, that's it, to push into error repo.
All right, thanks for the heads up there.
I see Kalpesh joining. Hey, Kalpesh, are you here? Okay, yeah, all right. That's all. I didn't have anything else.
All right, thanks. Last on the agenda is from Ogazan to discuss role ownership and kind of relationship with account work that's in progress. There's been a lot of good discussion with Preetha in the PR. Unfortunately, this meeting isn't a good time for her, but I'm I caught up on the discussion there, so I'm happy to continue discussion here. Will you introduce the topic and where you think we are?
Yes, yeah. So like we are trying to integrate STSIM to our client's workflow. So while doing it, so two topics somewhat related, but could be also discussed independently. One is like when we create a role, there's no ownership. Maybe perhaps the way we were doing is trying to map what AWS does and what RGW offers, try to like get a one-to-one map to the terminology from the AWS and to RGW. Maybe some confusion arise from there, but like in AWS case, for example, a client would log into its account, and then it can create users like IAM users, and it can create roles. Like the account is the natural owner of those resources, like IAM users and the roles, etc. So since, as of yet, at least since there's no account concept in RGW, like we are somewhat treating RGW user as the account, like a managed account in what would you see in AWS world. So one is if a user is creating a role, like we naturally thought it would own the created role. And the second topic is the capabilities, the way we kind of utilize the roles RGW capability is looks like from Pira's update, we may not be using it as intended design. So we are giving admin access to all our users so that like they can manage like the roles and all the other actions like put, post, etc. But this yields to a problem since we give admin access to like everyone, all RGW users. Now they can also manage some others users role without acquiring the permission. So
Right.
here, what I would like to perhaps here like to understand what's the intended design and the missing gap, like that, like the gap being missed in our testing, perhaps.
Yeah, unfortunately, the admin caps are it essentially expects an admin persona to be managing all of the roles, and so I don't think that's really compatible with granting them to end users for self-service.
It's like a organizational, like in a AWS world again, to make a one-to-one analogy. It's like organizational root would be having that privilege, right? None of the RGW users, but a particular system user kind of role would own it.
Right. Essentially, in Ceph world, it would be like the cluster admin or service provider that manages all of the roles. And I realize that's not ideal. One of the main motivators for the account project is to give users the ability to self-service or manage their own IAM stuff. And there's kind of a different permission model for that, which relies on the account having a root user, which gets permission to its own IAM APIs automatically. But
what we are trying to do, like let's assume the account is now available, that concept. So the account user would be kind of admin within that account, like, but still the capabilities wouldn't be relevant in that case, right? Still, my understanding is this capability, admin capability would be given only organizational root, like just one entity or persona. That's my understanding from Peter's update.
Well, at least with the account model that I'm envisioning here, it wouldn't rely on admin caps at all. You would just automatically have access to your own account resources, and there would be separate account, or sorry, separate like system users or admin caps that the site admin could use to still have access to change those things. You just wouldn't give them to end users.
I see. Okay. So in terms of backward compatibility, let's assume we have the account. So like we have existing users, and so we have to migrate them separately, right? So in an upgrade that's having this version of introducing the account concept. So we are going to have a mix of like regular RGW users and users with assigned to an account. Like, I assume that wouldn't be a problem, that transition. That's what you were referring to, non-account and account users, right? So at some point we may have a mix of them until we migrate, for example, all our RGW users to an account.
That's right. Yeah. The way I see that working is either you create a new role inside of an account and it's owned by the account and can be accessed by the account's root user, or the admin migrates an existing role into an account with something like Rados GW admin role modify with the account ID, and that would essentially update it to the new permission model. But for roles that don't belong to an account, still only the admin caps would be able to access and modify them.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So I think, yeah, that I got a better hang of on how the roles caps would be used. I think that the way we are using is not like intended use then. So we need to revise that. Going back to role ownership, that's somehow a separate discussion here. So like when there's an account, the account would be the natural owner of the role, right? Like in currently, though there's no account, only RGW user, and let's say they have a create role like permission and they're creating roles. So in that sense, again, having a role owner filled in a role, especially for the like visibility for an admin, like we do a role list, for example, we don't know who created that role. The role ownership portion, so is it something that we need, like the for purposes, for administrative purposes? That's something we were kind of interested in, but Prita has also some comments regarding that. Why would a user own like a role, which the resource actually should be owned by someone, some entity? But
yes, so the way that I see this is that obviously we would like to provide end users a way to manage their own roles. And so I can see a model where users can own roles similar to what I see for account ownership. I think the hard part there is just managing the isolation, for example. So if a user is managing roles, they only see the roles that they themselves own. And I've done a lot of work on the account side to track resources like that per account. We could potentially reuse some of that for user ownership. I think I'm happy to describe more of that in the PR, but I still think it's a question of whether it's worth the effort there. I see your point that we don't have accounts yet. And so you see that as like a short-term solution. But I mean, I think user ownership is complicated enough that.
And it may complicate the transition as well once the account is there, I'm guessing.
But potentially, yeah. But I mean, there would be a process to migrate existing users into accounts, and we already will have to transition the ownership of their buckets. So transitioning their roles is something that's potentially reasonable. But the account feature for sure, I don't see us backporting to Reef, and I wouldn't want to do backports of user ownership either, since that's going to be fairly complicated and change CLS stuff. But I'm happy to add more info to the PR, and we can continue discussion there. I do want to keep Preetha in the loop.
Yeah, and also at this point, then we will revise how we utilize the roles caps. We need to revise our workflow, I think, and I'll take a look at the account pending work as well. Try to test it out. With that too, I think that would be 2 action items for me on that end. Yeah, it was at this point. I don't have any other questions.
All right. Well, personally, I'm really happy to hear that you guys are looking at integrating the IAM stuff, and I would love your feedback on the account model that we're designing. If you guys want to get involved in that work.
One question. So, like down the road, we're planning to utilize OPA, to offload like this permission checks, rather than storing the permission policies, etc., on Ceph, but on a separate agent. So OPA integration is already in the Ceph, right? As far as we can tell.
It did merge years ago. I'm not sure that anybody's using it.
Okay, I see. There might be some gaps or issues. Okay.
Was it being tested in the in our upstream CI in any way?
I don't think so.
It does exist though.
Does it exist? Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Well, any other final thoughts here before we call it? All right. If anybody else is interested in following further discussions here, the PR is linked in the agenda. So if there's nothing else, thanks everybody. And if you're not around next week, then happy holidays. I'll see you guys next year then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.